Racism has been a cornerstone in American society since the 1800s. Granted, racism was a lot more physical back then, but it is still very prevalent in modern times. Many people are judged simply based on the color of their skin, especially African Americans. This thought of grouping all Black Americans under one stereotypical umbrella is a form of prejudice known as racial bias. Not all Black people are criminals or dangerous just because of their race. This fact should be obvious, but many still struggle to grasp this concept. Some of the biggest perpetrators are police officers. The police are supposed to protect the people, but a vast majority feel like they do the exact opposite. For years now, people have called for police reform. However, their call has yet to be answered. Part of the issue is that there is little data on police officers and their response to calls. In 2019, the FBI wanted to compose a national data set regarding police officers. However, they only received data from 40% of police officers in the US. This is because submitting data is voluntary for police officers, so naturally many would choose not to. Similarly, a study based on 2 million 911 calls concluded that white officers dispatched to predominantly Black neighborhoods were 5 times more likely to use their firearm when compared to Black officers dispatched to similar neighborhoods. There are several reasons for this absurd number, including officers with a bad temper, insecure masculinities, and of course racial bias. The problem is that all these reasons could have been noticed and dealt with in police training before any firearm had to be used. Of course, these instances of unwarranted police aggression negatively affect the victims as well as their family and friends. However, these same instances have proven to affect the surrounding Black community as a whole. David R. Williams is a professor of African and African American Studies at Harvard University. He has looked at some data between the years 2013 and 2015 and found links between shootings of innocent Black people and their mental health. He says that every police shooting of an unarmed Black person was linked to worse mental health for the entire Black population in the state where that shooting had occurred for the next 3 months. Williams also found that the same is true for smaller instances of discrimination, not just unjust shootings. This clip from a TED Talk by Williams explains just how much effect discrimination has on the well-being of Black communities.
Research has found that higher levels of discrimination are associated with the elevated risk of a broad range of diseases, from blood pressure to abdominal obesity to breast cancer to heart disease and even premature mortality.
Now, I want to change directions and look at one of, if not the most notorious example of police brutality of African Americans. I am referring to the wrongful murder of George Floyd. George Floyd was unjustly killed by law enforcement, and the result was one of the largest nationwide protests America has ever seen. The public were protesting for an improvement in law enforcement, but still there is little being done on that front. This protest spread around the nation and even to other countries, but still nothing has changed. Government has gone back on their promises to defund the police and hold them accountable. So, how do we fight police brutality? This graphic details some ways that the police can prevent this issue. As for the public, I would like to discuss a couple ways that citizens can help combat this issue. Obviously, protesting is an effective way to get people to listen. Even though there may be some issues with the concept of protesting, it's still a good way to let the people know that we won't tolerate this anymore and that something needs to be done. Another way to combat this issue is by intervening when you see something wrong. If you see police wrongfully detaining or using aggressive force against someone, try to get involved and hold them accountable. Obviously, don't get in the way of them doing their jobs, but be aware of what's happening so that you can intervene when necessary. This snapshot is from the body cam footage from the George Floyd murder. As you can see, the witnesses are attempting to reason with the cop rather than just letting it happen. Lastly, I want to touch on how important it is to understand what you're fighting for. Many people who were involved in the protests were only involved because it was a popular thing to do at the time. While that does give the movement extra supporters, it hinders the movement by not having everyone on the same page. Being unified is what gives the movement strength. It's important to fight the good fight, not because you can, but because you should.